UFC Fight Night Vegas 86, Hermansson versus Pyfer just took place, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my reaction and breakdown to every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Fernie Garcia versus Hyder Amil. I rewatched a lot of these fights because I missed a few of them while I was getting ready, and I was a little late to the card. Okay, I'm turning into a little bit of a casual, but with these fight nights, can you blame me? There's nothing compelling me to watch. But this wasn't the first fight on the card. The first fight was Daniel Marcos versus Aori Qileng. Daniel Marcos was doing really good, outlanding Aori Qileng. Landed a brutal knee to the face of Aori Qileng at one point as well. Has him busted open. Hurt to the eye. I think his eye was busted, Aori Qileng, and his cheek was bleeding and all sorts. His face was starting to swell up. Aori Qileng was landing big shots now and again, but Daniel Marcos was rolling with them. Both guys would end up against a cage now and then, but it was mainly just Daniel Marcos picking at him, annoying him, and that big knee that he landed was huge as well. So eventually a groin shot happens in round 2. Down goes Aori Qileng. He doesn't get back up. It's called a no contest, I guess. Daniel Marcos kind of gets robbed of a win because he landed a groin shot. You hate to see it, but he was on his way to winning that fight and he was looking pretty good. We move on. Up the card. Fernie Garcia versus Hyder Amil. This was obviously going to happen. Fernie Garcia is not UFC level. That's been proven by the fact that he's been 0-3 in the promotion since joining. Hyder Amil beat him up, but nearly got hurt at one point in the fight. This one was a scrappy one. Round 1, he goes out there, gets scrappy, gets the back of Fernie Garcia very soon into round 1. Round 2, geez, why am I salivating? Maybe it was a really good fight. Jesus, I've got like heartburn right now. Round 2, they get scrappy again. Fernie Garcia actually landed a good counter hook on Hyder Amil that stumbled him backwards for a second, but eventually Hyder Amil gets the position on the ground, tries a bunch of times to get a rear naked choke, doesn't quite get it, but eventually finishes Fernie Garcia up against a cage with volume and absolute onslaught of punishment. So really good job from Hyder Amil. He gets the job done by TKO. We move on. Zach Pauga versus Bogdan Guskov. Now, Bogdan Guskov was an underdog going into this. I have no idea why. One of them lost to Mo Usman. One of them lost to Volkan Ozdemir in his debut. What are we talking about here? Bogdan Guskov smoked Zach Pauga in round 1. Zach Pauga actually looked a lot faster than Bogdan Guskov to begin with, though, to be honest with you. Like, he was landing decent shots, chopping low with some kicks here and there. He was actually looking pretty quick and pretty dangerous on the feet, but then Bogdan catches him with a straight right on the chin, finishes him off, and is screaming at Pauga's body as it sinks towards the canvas in front of him. Nasty KO win from Bogdan. I'm assuming he's going to get a performance bonus because I don't think any fight deserved a fight of the night. We move on. Max Griffin versus Jeremiah Wells. Awful fight. Terrible to watch. I thought Jeremiah Wells won the fight. They gave it to Max Griffin, split decision. I thought Jeremiah Wells got the first 2 rounds. I'm not going to say robbery because I get it. Like, not much happened. But I thought Wells landed shots. Like, in round 2, he wobbled Max Griffin at one point. Like, I don't care if Griffin outlanded him a little bit. Griffin getting visibly wobbled in round 2 is enough for me to say that Jeremiah Wells should win that round. Round 1, he, like, knocked Griffin a little bit uncoordinated with like a spinning back fist at one point when they clashed, and even got the better of the takedown out of the 2 of them. They both got a takedown in round 1. Max Griffin won the 3rd round, which Jeremiah Wells seemed to just sort of coast towards a decision with, which maybe he shouldn't have done. But I thought Jeremiah Wells barely did more damage in the 1st and 2nd round. They gave it to Max Griffin. It is what it is. We move on. Up the card, Devin Clark versus Marcin Prachnio. I'm actually kind of proud of this pick. A lot of people were skipping up on Prachnio and going straight for Devin Clark. I liked Prachnio here, and he got it done. Dude, Prachnio is a very capable striker. You've got to have a great ground game to take him down and defeat him there, or you've got to have wicked knockout power and finishing ability on the feet to take him out of the fight there. If you can't take Prachnio out of the fight, he's probably going to outstrike you to a decision win. And in round 3, Clark had moments, and it looked like Prachnio was slowing down, but For the early rounds, Prachnio was just outlanding him. His kicks are clean, the body kicks, throwing him to the arms, chopping low with kicks as well. It was like a fight with William Knight, but William Knight threw back now and again in Devin Clark. So, really good win from Marcin Prachnio. Didn't look like a world beater. Didn't look like a guy we're going to start believing in to make a run in the light heavyweight division, but he's good. And he beat Khalil Roundtree over 3 rounds. I know a lot of people don't agree with that decision, but he clearly outlanded Khalil Roundtree in that fight significantly. I know Khalil was throwing heavier and making Prachnio sort of stumble now and again. But Prachnio schooled Khalil on the feet in that fight, if you rewatch it. Like, he was just better than him at striking, even though Khalil had more power, and that's what made the fight close. Prachnio's technique is up there, so good job to him. He won the fight. I called it as well as an underdog. We move on. Loma Lookboonme versus Bruna Brasil. Loma Lookboonme is tiny. Absolutely tiny, by the way. But Bruna Brasil still couldn't do anything. Outlanded, picked at, great striking from Loma Lookboonme. Had, I think, a hip toss at one point, or no. She had like an inside trip from the clinch. She has really good clinch takedowns. Obviously, that comes from her Muay Thai background. Her sweeps and trips that she goes for in the clinch are normally where she gets a lot of her takedowns from. And Bruna Brasil just wasn't in any way good on the feet at all. Good job, Loma Lookboonme. This was a pretty clear one. The only thing worrying was the size of Bruna Brasil, but Loma Lookboonme's actually good at a strawweight. We move on. Up the card, Bolaji Oki versus Timi Cuamba. I went with Bolaji. I said he would get a TKO. He ended up getting a decision. He just had his jab popping out there. It was a pretty uneventful fight, to be honest with you. Pretty uneventful fight. Just Bolaji Oki flicking his jab out there now and again. Pop, pop, pop. Tried to follow up here and there, but wasn't really too successful with it. Both guys got a takedown. But it was just him popping his little shots out there, and Timi Cuamba not really being able to land clean on him throughout the entire fight. So Bolaji just sort of stayed barely ahead on strikes for the majority of the fight. Wasn't the best, but good win from Bolaji Oki. Kept it controlled. Didn't make any unneeded risks, and got the win. We move on. Trevin Giles versus Carlos Prates. Now, we were nearly in for another fraud check on this card. We'll get to the main event in a second, but we were nearly in for another fraud check on this card. Trevin Giles was starting to really figure out Prates in that fight, and it's actually kind of sad that Giles got put out cold in round 2. I picked Prates round 2 KO. So I was right, but I wasn't right, if you know what I'm saying, because I thought he would look a lot better than he did. He was doing all right, landing some shots here and there, throwing some kicks on Trevin Giles, but Giles, at a certain point before he got KO'd, at the start of round 2 and towards the end of round 1, was boxing the brakes off Carlos Prates. Landing his shots at will. Couldn't really land them at the start of the fight because of the stance change. Of course, I think the commentary were talking about that as well. It's hard for Giles to land his jab on a southpaw in Prates. But Giles was doing good with his kicks early and then started boxing and tuning up Prates, only to get chinned in round 2 by Prates, who shut all that momentum swing and fraud checking right dead in its tracks. So good job, Carlos Prates, but some stuff to work on for sure. We move on to the main card. Rodolfo Vieira versus Armen Petrosyan. Good job, Rodolfo Vieira. I thought Armen Petrosyan was going to be able to survive round 1, and if he did, I reckon he would have gone on to win this fight. But he got taken down too much in round 1 and kept giving up his back, trying to get back up. So really bad mistakes from him there. Eventually, Rodolfo Vieira settled into a dominant position in half guard, and it was sort of Armen Petrosyan figuring out what he wanted to do. Does he give up his back? Does he give up mounts? Like, either way, you're in trouble against Rodolfo Vieira. And Rodolfo Vieira eventually got an arm triangle on him. There was some confusion. He did tap, but I guess he didn't think he did because he was nearly out of it, I guess, in the tap. But yeah, Rodolfo Vieira just kept getting his takedowns. Really, really good. I honestly thought, though, if he would have survived that round, Rodolfo would have been in trouble. Rodolfo shot quite a few takedowns, big slams, big pickups, and drop him down, and really muscled his way for some of those grappling moments that he had. And I thought if they would have went into the later rounds and Armen started stuffing a few of them, we would have seen Rodolfo slow down and eventually lose. But he got it done. I swear I'm picking Anthony Hernandez against Roman Kopylov. I've got a feeling about it. We move on. Up the card, Michael Johnson versus Darius Flowers. He nearly pulled a Michael Johnson on us. Round 3, starts stuffing his head into that triangle. Nearly, so nearly, pulled a Michael Johnson on us. He was winning the fight. Round 1 was a bit closer because Darius Flowers was landing really good kicks to the body of Michael Johnson, side kick to the body, stomping at the leg of Michael Johnson as well. And you could see it was starting to annoy Johnson. But Johnson started finding his own body shots back on Flowers. Both guys were tipping their heads back, worried about punches to the chin. But Johnson started throwing a 2 to the body after a lead hand upstairs, or a lead hand to the chest and a 2 to the body. And that really started to slow down Darius Flowers. Eventually, Johnson starts getting takedowns. At the end of round 1, he gets one. I thought he won round 1 because he started landing good towards the end of it. Round 2, he won it. He got a takedown there as well. Round 3, maybe he got 2 takedowns in round 3. Maybe I'm misremembering it. But, yeah, he nearly got subbed in round 3. And then he nearly got flying kneed after that as well. So I was worried that somehow Flowers was going to beat Johnson, even though Johnson can beat Tony Ferguson in his prime and Dustin Poirier. But either way, Darius Flowers loses, probably going to get cut from the UFC's 12-7. Shouldn't have been there anyway. Michael Johnson wins. Good job. Good for Michael Johnson. Gets paid, gets some money, and probably going to get a decently named fight at lightweight after this. We move on. Up the card. Brad Tavares versus Gregory Rodrigues. Pretty interesting fight. Rodrigues wins by 3rd round TKO, but Brad Tavares hung in there and gave him some problems before that. Rodrigues started to take over as the fight went on because he started to track down Tavares, and of course putting him away against a cage in round 3 is what finished the deal. He also got takedowns on Tavares, who got back up. Hard to take down Tavares. Very difficult to take down Tavares. But Brad was landing good shots. In round 1, he had Rodrigues wobbled for a second as well with a hook. You know how chinny Rodrigues is. But Rodrigues would land back, and all of a sudden Brad Tavares would go straight back to not committing to his shots anymore. And it sort of gave Rodrigues the get-go to do what he wanted on the front foot. Tavares isn't known for power in his hands. He had some pop in his shots. You could see he was trying to put some shots together, some power shots, but they just weren't working on Rodrigues, who had a better chin today than he's shown before. So, great job by Gregory Rodrigues. Got the job done. Got the TKO in the 3rd round. Up against a cage with Brad Tavares covering up. And Tavares was out of it as well. I know he protested the stoppage, but he wasn't moving to defend himself. So, yeah. Gregory Rodrigues wins. We move on. Up the card. Robert Brycek versus Ihor Potieria. I went with Brycek because I thought Ihor Potieria wasn't all that, and he took this fight on a few days' notice. It turns out Robert Brycek is awful. He had nothing to offer. But to be fair to him, he was landing some big power shots, and Potieria was just eating them. Like, I thought because this guy got finished before in fights, like he's taken damage now, you know, this power punch is going to come in and catch him, legendary Polish power, this and that. And he took it on 6 days' notice, down a weight class. That is all the red flags possible. But Ihor Potieria showed that it was a bit of a shitty fight. Both of them were sloppy as fuck, to be honest with you. But, to his credit, Potieria, or Potieria, whatever his name is, on short notice, to push in the 3rd round the way he did, was impressive of him, to be fair. He pushed in a later round, put some shots together, had Brycek hurt at one point in the 3rd round as well, started going after him, and yeah, Ihor Potieria won the fight. I think could have won every round, but definitely the 2nd and 3rd as far as I can remember. So, good job, Potieria. Needs to work on some stuff for sure, but maybe we'll see a better version of him with a full training camp and with some momentum now that he's coming off a win. So, good job to him. We move on. Up the card, Dan Ige versus Andre Fili. What's there to say? Andre Fili was looking good. So was Dan Ige. Both guys were landing shots, and actually Andre Fili was landing some good punches on Ige with his left hook and shots like that. But then, out of nowhere, Dan Ige times Andre Fili over the top of his lead hand, which goes back down to his side. It's the same way that Joe Anderson Brito caught Andre Fili. It's the same way that Nathaniel Wood caught Andre Fili in the 1st round, and Ige timed him over the top, landed a right hand right on the side of the head of Andre Fili, who goes down and out in round 1, dreaming of big booty Latinas. He could have been a big name after this as well, because he had a bit of traction on social media after that Latinas comment. I'm with you, brother. But Dan Ige got it done. Shut all the noise down. KO'd him brutally in round 1. Definitely going to get a performance bonus. And actually made a joke on the microphone. We're getting personality out of Ige now. Different level Ige. Good job, Dan Ige. We move on to the main event. Jack Hermansson versus Joe Pyfer. This is the interest. Joe Pyfer got fraud checked, man. Joe Pyfer got fraud checked. And it's sad to see that. Because you know what's the saddest part about this? Actually, there's two saddest parts. The one saddest part that I just thought of now is that I was picking Hermansson. When it first got announced, I was like, I don't know, man. I think Hermansson might be able to beat him with his kicks. Did you see that Abdul was actually getting to him with his low kicks in that fight? I wish I would have picked Hermansson. That would have been genius. But then I was thinking, you know what? Dolidze can't throw a punch to save his life. Vettori dropped Hermansson. Pyfer's dangerous. He's flattened Gerald Meerschaert in a round. Like he put away Abdul Razak Hassan, who's good, by the way, who's not some bottom of the barrel guy in that division. He's a talented guy, and Pyfer bullied him and beat him. So I was like, Hermansson after a long time off with injury, is he going to come back and be okay in the early 2 rounds? He was all right in the early 2 rounds. He lost them pretty clearly. But as soon as it was past round 1, I was like, Jesus, this ain't good for Pyfer. This is not good for Pyfer. Now, the recounted stats are showing this a little closer. But even still, Hermansson clearly won the last 3 rounds. Secured a takedown at the end of the 5th round to make sure that he got it as well. But the numbers were pretty close in hindsight, especially in round 4 compared to what I thought they were going to be. But yeah, round 3, 4, and 5, Jack Hermansson. Now, Pyfer would still have moments where he would wobble Hermansson. I think at the end of round 3, stunned Hermansson with a shot. And it was like, oh shit, here comes Pyfer. But Hermansson had already done too much damage. He jabbed Pyfer straight in his eye at one point in this fight. And Pyfer acted like he got eye poked. Because obviously the knuckle went straight into the eye. Low kicks were chewing up Pyfer's leg. Pyfer couldn't get a takedown on him either. Great takedown defense from Hermansson. But that was against a one-legged Pyfer. So wasn't much hope that he would complete those takedowns. And yeah, Jack Hermansson wins, man. It sucks. But that's just middleweight, man. You have to be the great Roman Dolidze to beat Jack Hermansson. You have to be of the skill level of the great Roman Dolidze to beat Jack Hermansson. I'm joking. Hermansson was schooling him and then got subbed. But man, Pyfer couldn't beat Hermansson. Interesting stuff. I thought this was a good step in because I thought he wouldn't get ragdolled. He wouldn't get taken down, and he wouldn't fear it, so he would definitely catch Hermansson's weird-ass style. But turns out, no. Couldn't do it in the later rounds. But to be fair to Pyfer, this is probably the best way to get fraud checked. You got calf kicked a bunch, you didn't get knocked down or dropped or or a face bone broken, orbital broken, nose broken, anything like that, as far as we know. Didn't get a hand broken or TKO'd or subbed or exposed on the ground for having no ground game. Like, it's an adjustable exposure, you know, very adjustable exposure, but good for Jack Hermansson, you know, he stayed in there. And to be fair, once he had momentum and he had Joe Pyfer on one leg, his boxing started to look pretty good. You know, he started to land his jab, he started to switch and land straight rights off of the lead leg. Like, he's throwing really unorthodox stuff, but it was working on Pyfer. You could see Pyfer, like, getting his head popped back and being like, fuck, dude, this isn't supposed to be happening. But one thing that was evident, I'm spitting everywhere, everyone's going to roast Joe Pyfer now because people said he had more power than Ngannou. The machine said that, by the way. The same machine that everyone believed when Ngannou set the record. Just want to be honest. Everyone was believing the machine when Ngannou set the record, not when Joe Pyfer did. All good. It turns out Jack Hermansson can take everything Ngannou can throw. Middleweights do have the best chins in the world. Vettori hits the hardest, harder than Ngannou because he dropped Hermansson. It's all... No, but seriously, the hype around Pyfer in the build-up, I think, costed him. And he said it in the post-fight speech about all the media obligations. I wouldn't even say it was the media obligations. Pyfer was throwing shots on Hermansson like he was expecting him to die upon the connection of a punch. You know? Like, he was genuinely throwing a shot and then just looking at Hermansson afterwards like, when's it going to happen? When's he going to get flatlined by my more power than Ngannou? He actually fell into his own hype of power. He does have wicked power, by the way. He'll probably go on to get more KO wins. But he really believed in it for this one. That power machine telling him he hit harder than Ngannou, he really believed in it. So, very interesting. But yeah, Jack Hermansson gets the win, calls out Nassourdine Imavov. I say do that matchup. I'm not against it. Looking forward to it. Good for Jack Hermansson. I'm so low down on this. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.